Claire Brimelow is with us today. And Hannah Claire, you work for the Quartering. Mm-hmm. You are a voice there. You've been in this journalism space for a long time. Mm-hmm. The one complaint that I have of you coming here today is you didn't bring your cat.
Yeah, I didn't bring my cat, and my cat smuggled babies into my apartment when I adopted her. So,
like cat babies.
Oh,
yeah.
I was feeding this.
Like, what kind of animal are we talking about?
Okay, well, I was feeding this stray cat because I have become a mountain woman in West Virginia, and that's what I felt like my calling
living
was.
The dream.
And there's this tiny black, like skinny kitten last year, and so I started feeding her, and then I moved, and I was like, "You're dependent on me. You must come with me." And then within like 4 weeks, I found out that she was like very close to giving birth.
Oh, wow.
And so I have some of her kittens still. It's all secret. Nobody tell my landlord, please. But, yeah, they didn't make the trip out. You know, they're just country animals. They don't really feel like DC is the place for them.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Somewhat understandable.
But before I was a cat wrangler, I was formerly with Timcast, and I'm with the Quartering now. I'm sort of a news junkie.
I love it. How did you get into that?
So I have always been interested in writing and news and journalism. I did some time with nonprofits and a couple other different conservative organizations. But ultimately, when Tim Pool wanted to start his news site, he brought on Cassandra Fairbanks, who brought on me. And we were sort of the first two people who went on. And I was there for about 3.5 years. And now I'm with, I work with Jeremy at the Quartering, and we do a 1 p.m. live stream every day. It's mostly on Rumble. And then I'm hoping in December to have some independent projects roll out, so you can find them on my personal channels on the internet. It's crazy to be in the media landscape because I think things just change so quickly.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But especially with podcasting, you guys must feel this, you know, if you it's sort of like you're jumping in a river.
Oh yeah,
being live 5 nights a week is a weird way to cut your teeth.
That is a whirlwind. Mm-hmm. That is a whirlwind. And like you make a plan at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. You're like, all right, we're going to talk about this, and then by like 7 o'clock, you're like, well, that's all out the window.
Yeah, you have to wait, and especially during the election season. I mean, everything in a news cycle, especially for any podcast, could get shifted by like one tweet that's going viral that you have to jump on, or you know, an offhanded comment made by a comedian at a rally that's going to dominate the cycle. I mean, it's a really exciting sphere to be in, but it's definitely something that you have to keep your eyes on everything at all times, which can be crazy.
It is wild. Well, we're super glad to have you here with us on Problematic Women. For those joining us for the first time, I'm Virginia Allen.
I'm Kristen Eichhammer.
And here on Problematic Women, we love to talk about the issues that are of most interest to conservative women. We embrace the fact that as conservative women, we just are problematic to the left. They don't know what to do with us. So we celebrate that. And we look at the news that you're interested in as conservative ladies, as problematic ladies. So we have a few things to cover this week, including all of the presidential appointments. That is a wild ride. And some big issues that have really continued to rise to the top, I think, on people's minds this election. So this election season that has finally sort of come to a close, but yet still on everyone's minds. So let's go ahead and jump into it here.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to talk to you today, Hannah Claire, because to your point, it's kind of the media world is shifting a little bit, right? And we have more reporters, if you want to call them that are on the ground, more readily available. Like it's almost citizen reporters. And Virginia and I did this just this weekend. We went to the Women's March, which it wasn't the big Women's March. It was kind of a reaction to the election, which obviously happened last week. It was, or 2 weeks ago.
Last minute Women's March.
It was a last minute.
Let's all be angry together.
Yes, exactly. And it was super different than I expected. I'm not sure what you thought, Virginia. I've never been to a women's march. I've been to the March for Life. I've been to that type of gathering. But this was a little different than what I expected in terms of messaging and just general accusations. Should I just play our first clip so we can get an idea of the audience and
so as we kick off tea time, we went for context and we asked women at the Women's March, why do you think Harris lost? What would you say to women who voted for Trump? Would you ever date a guy who voted for Trump? And we got some great reactions. So yeah, let's go ahead and roll clip one.
I think there's a lot of different factors to why Kamala lost. I think that part of it is like the prejudice that's in this country and the sexism and the racism. I also think that there needed to be more organization on the Democratic Party side. And yeah, it's a lot more complicated than that, but
totally. What would you say to women who chose to vote for Trump?
I don't even know what I would say to them. It's just like that's a concept that I can't personally wrap my head around. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time.
And I'd say that was a tamer response.
That was a tame response.
We kind of were inserted in this situation. I was originally just along for the ride, kind of just, helping Virginia and then our videographer, Tim. But they started getting followed by, I don't even know who this person was.
It was very weird. And I don't know if you've had experiences like this at these kind of events, but because we go to these pretty regularly, and we'll certainly have people that give us a little bit of a hard time because we're conservative media and we're open about that. But there was a young man who was probably about 20 years old, and every time we would approach someone and say, hey, can we talk to you? He would insert himself and say, they are far-right media, don't talk to them. Yeah. And then the people would just shut down. And this happened repeatedly, and it became very clear he wasn't going to leave us alone. So then Tim and I were like, all right, we'll go back inside. We'll send Kristen out because at that point he didn't know Kristen was with the Daily Signal. And so she went out and started doing interviews.
And they did not hold back. The question of why she lost, what they would say to women that voted for Trump, not the nicest, very colorful. And you can check out the answers. Things out. Yeah, you can check out the answers on our social media. But it was so interesting to see the difference in, we've seen both sides kind of post-election at this point. And in 2020, I don't necessarily remember exactly what the response was, but just the Women's March in general, it was...
I think for many people, it's a very visceral response. But I think it would be helpful for women like this if we can answer that question for her, that, like, the why. Because she's like, I can't even wrap my mind around the concept of another woman voting for Trump. And I'm like, you can't?
Which is crazy because CNN's exit polls show that it's predominantly unmarried women who voted for Harris, right? But women who are married voted for Trump. And they also know from exit polls, I think Edison put out this research, that it's rural women and women without college degrees who supported Trump in this round. And it's highly educated, multiple degrees, a college degree, women who tend to lean blue and then were shocked when people didn't follow them. And I think that there is this arrogance among female liberals that believe that they know best. And I know there was one of the commentators on The View kept calling them uneducated women. Uneducated women voted for Trump. And the reality is the college degree is a financial death sentence, right? You go into huge amounts of student loan debt to take it. I don't know that I would be taking advice from women who are gambling with their economic future like that. The reality is that female voters who believe that their whole identity is Democrats have very little else going on. And that sounds really cold and mean, and I don't mean it to be. It's just that they can't relate to anybody else because they have wrapped their identity in an ideology that doesn't love them back. And it's like when you know someone who should leave their boyfriend who's like bad, but they just won't do it. And so therefore they can't understand why you're saying their boyfriend is bad. They just don't get it. In this case, the Democrats really staked this election on abortion, but they didn't understand what women mean or fear when they fear losing their health care. Or they didn't understand that women prioritize economic strength. These pocketbook issues, so many of them in the households are decided by women. And for someone who is single, maybe, has a nice income, whatever else, like she's never had to put herself in a position that the majority of American women are in this economy and in this culture.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about that on the show, that really the Democrat Party had one message for women this election was vote for us because of abortion. Like that was it. That was their only campaign slogan for women, was just abortion, abortion, abortion. And this is an issue that is not going away. I think after Roe v. Wade was overturned, it was sort of like, all right, how is this issue going to be messaged? What are we going to see? And now it's really centered on this fight, specifically around the abortion pill and messaging around the abortion pill. And we saw before Roe v. Wade was overturned the threat of women will die, women will die, women will die. Well, now after, you even have people like Kamala Harris coming out and saying women have died. And it's built around situations of Amber Thurman in Georgia. And I know you've discussed this issue, but I think that's really important to talk about these things and to have the conversation of, okay, what actually happened in this situation, and to talk about it with a lot of compassion because it is a tragedy, but to bring in, okay, this is actually the real reality. So I know you've covered this issue pretty thoroughly. remind us, who is Amber Thurman?
So Amber Thurman was a single mom, or an unmarried mom in Georgia. She had I believe, 6-year-old son. She had a boyfriend I think she was living with, and she was pregnant with twins.
Mm-hmm.
And Georgia has a 6-week abortion ban that went into effect after Roe v. Wade was repealed. And so she traveled to North Carolina. She got stuck in traffic. She went with a friend, and I guess was supposed to undergo a surgical abortion and was offered instead a chemical abortion. So she was given the abortion pill. The abortion center did not have any federal obligation to offer her a ultrasound beforehand to make sure the pregnancy wasn't ectopic, and they didn't have to offer her an ultrasound afterwards to make sure all the fetal tissue had been passed. So these used to be requirements everywhere. In 2020 under the Biden-Harris administration, they were repealed. At the time, it was like, but COVID and you could get sick or whatever else. I obviously think it was something more sinisterly motivated, but I'll keep that speculation to myself. So Amber returned back to Georgia and developed sepsis, which is really common among it's the biggest risk factor for women who take a chemical abortion. So chemical abortions send 1 in 20 women who take them to the ER. And again, sepsis is the most common cause of injury or death because of the abortion pill. Abortion pills represent the majority of abortions in America. So there are lots of questions. I know ProPublica was the first one to break this story, and that when Vice President Kamala Harris went on stage and talked about it, she said, the doctors at the ER, we believe wouldn't treat her because of the ban in Georgia. I've actually never seen any confirmation about why the DNC that could have removed the fetal tissue. So, sorry, I'll back up. Amber Thurman developed sepsis because not all the fetal tissue passed. It's obviously extremely dangerous. Typically, you would perform a DNC, and that would remove any remaining fetal tissue. DNCs are not the same as abortions. They never have been. People who miscarry a baby and who's far enough along who cannot, pass it have to have some kind of medical intervention. No one recognizes that as abortion. Only people who lobby for abortions scare women by claiming a DNC as abortion. So the remaining fetal tissue, she was in the ER for like 20 hours. She developed sepsis. She was initially treated with antibiotics. To me, in my research in this, it's not clear if her family initially came out and said she is going through an abortion. She took the chemical abortion pill. She needs help, or if they didn't tell her doctors right away. It's really unclear. Okay. So ultimately, after about 20 hours, she was taken into surgery and given an emergency hysterectomy, and she died because of complications due to this. But it's important to remember that though the board in Georgia that reviewed her death said it was preventable, it was the media who declared it was the abortion ban in Georgia. And I think that really is one of the ways that we do a disservice to women in this country. I think a lot of women don't understand their reproductive health, pro-life women included, right? There are so many women who do not know how their hormones work or how their menstrual cycle works, or, what the odds are when you take when you have unprotected sex, or when you, undergo anything, right? They are not fully educated on the way their body works together. And I think similarly, because a lot of the warnings federally that were taken off, and a lot of these risk mitigation systems that we have were removed under the Biden-Harris administration, women who might have gone for an abortion no matter what were not properly informed, and were also not protected from the risk that the abortion pill has. How many times do you hear people say, well, it's just an abortion? I remember this is several years ago, Teen Vogue put out this. Do you remember this cover story? They had this article that was like, how to support your friend who's gotten an abortion. Yeah. Buy her some fun pins, a movie, an ice pack. Ha ha ha.
Gosh.
Yeah.
What about her risk for cervical cancer? What about her risk for breast cancer? What about the impact on her fertility long term? What about making sure that she goes to get an ultrasound to make sure that everything that needs to be removed has been removed? What about telling her that this isn't her only option, And these are just things that were totally thrown out by a culture that says that abortion is healthcare and it's the only way for women who are in their situation, which I think is really sad. But again, I think Amber Thurman's death is tragic. I think it's awful. She was pregnant with twins. She left behind a very young son, right? But she didn't die because Georgia banned the abortion. She died because she went under a chemical abortion without pre or post care as far as we can tell. That's horrible. That's like saying, take this thing that's going to scramble your body and we'll see you when we see you. I don't think anyone would treat anyone that way. I mean, even when you have like, you know, minor surgery on your ankle, you have a follow-up with your doctor. There are all kinds of ways that we treat regular injuries better than we treat women who are opting to get an abortion. And again, I don't think abortion should be the number one choice. I'm not personally in favor of it. But with compassion for women who feel like they're in that situation, they still deserve to be protected or fully educated about the risks.
Well, and it's not complicated to add those protections to say, okay, you have to talk to your doctor before you take the pill. You have to have an ultrasound to confirm that you are at the very least under that 10-week, which really 10 weeks is really, really pushing it. And really enters a very, very danger zone for taking that abortion pill. You have to make sure that it's not an ectopic pregnancy. Like it's just like a no-brainer, absolute no-brainer to have that ultrasound and then to have a follow-up as well. And I mean, really at the end of the day, I think sending women home with the pills in general is just a bad idea.
And there's this, so the other, ProPublica also talked about, I believe her name is Candy Miller. She's also an African-American woman from Georgia who also died in 2022 because of a negative experience with abortion. So she also developed sepsis. She was, they'll call it, she was managing her abortion at home, and you'll hear commenters say, this is becoming more common. But it's becoming more common because the chemical pill is often mailed to women who have no obligation or are not instructed to see a doctor.
In some cases.
They're in vending machines. It's crazy. And again, like there is a streak where you want to be compassionate, but you also want to say, are you actually advocating for women when you do not properly inform them of the risks? So Miss Miller died at home because of a combination of the abortion pill, but also I believe medications that her family said they think that she was using to manage the pain. Did she know about the risks of sepsis? Did she know what she was going through? And they say, well, she was scared to go to the doctor or the ER because she had gotten an abortion and it wasn't legal in Georgia or whatever.
Who do we blame for that? The media that fearmongers and says you can't because otherwise you'll get arrested or something. It's like, no, absolutely not.
And this woman was 41 years old. She had lupus, she had diabetes, and she had been told by doctors, and this is where the reporting gets unclear to me because I've never been able to find out when this was. Before she was told that another pregnancy would kill her, that it was extremely dangerous. Was she told that before she conceived a child and given her proper instruction on options for birth control? I mean, I don't even like the birth control pill, and like that's the very least you could do, right? Or was she told after? And at that point, like, what doctor is saying, well, you're just gonna die? Like, surely a doctor is like, well, now that we're in this situation, let's figure out how to serve you as best as we can and protect both you and the child. But you get these stories that are championed by people who are saying, see what these restrictive laws do, without turning to the healthcare system and saying, why did you fail these women? Why did they not know that there were risks? Why did they not know where they could get care? Why are you guys saying a DNC is the same as an abortion and therefore keeping women from going to the ER in emergency situations, right? Like, this doesn't make any sense. If you look at the laws, sorry if I'm talking a lot. I just
love it. No,
the thing is, like,
you might be passionate about this.
Look, and the thing is, it just becomes illogical, right? Like, I think that so much of it is a scare tactic, and it bothers me so much that, we have on the one hand people on The View saying it's uneducated women who are voting for Trump, and at the same time giving women misinformation about stuff that could be life or death, right?
Right.
Like, you can't have it both ways. Either you think you're better than them, so you have a moral obligation to give them accurate information, or you are not better than they are, and they are making different choices, which you should have the decency to respect. So in so many states, there are exceptions for pregnancies conceived through incest, through rape. In most states, it's specifically spelled out that a DNC is not considered the same thing as an abortion. Like, there are all these things, and instead we get Kamala Harris saying the Trump abortion ban, and they're going to take away everything, and next they're coming after the birth control pill, and all of this stuff. And meanwhile, you want to say, like, do you guys understand what the birth control pill does to your body? Do you understand what abortion does to the body? Do you know what the proper care you need after an abortion is? Or are you just ordering an abortion pill by mail because you've been scared by the media into thinking this is your only way out in life?
And there are so few just care options for abortion, for the abortion pill, so few, but our bodies are so different, and we see how many options there are in other ways of healthcare and in nutrition and just our bodies are so different, but for so long they have been pushing the same solutions for this quote unquote problem and calling it healthcare, just wrapping it up in that. There are so few restrictions, and that's actually something we wanted to talk about as well. Like the restrictions on these abortion drugs. I mean, again, you can find them in vending machines. So in my mind, I just walk me through this, right? We have the pill, and you have to go to a doctor and you have to get that prescribed. But in many cases for Plan B, you don't have to necessarily talk to a doctor. You can just like mail order it.
Or walk into a pharmacy.
Are there any more restrictions that I'm not thinking?
Well, the other one is, I don't know if you guys follow this at all, but the FDA has given initial approval to O-pill, which is an over-the-counter birth control pill. So there are, and this is common in like France. You can get, there's an over-the-counter equivalent. So there is, I don't know if it's on the market yet or if it's just like in the final phase.
It's coming.
But there is an over-the-counter birth control pill. I think the birth control pill is whack. I think that we do not explain to women. I think there are some women who benefit from it. I think that we can't talk about in absolutes in medicine because the body is so different.
Totally different.
But I think that most girls who are prescribed the birth control pill don't need it. You know, I don't know how many of you guys know, but like I know tons of people who are like, I have horrible cramps. And the doctor was like, well, it could be endometriosis, but I don't know. Here's the birth control pill.
Yeah.
What?
It's just the solution.
It doesn't
they
make any
slap
sense.
down.
And to your point with regulations on the chemical abortion pill, you know, Amber Thurman was pregnant with twins. There are some people that say you need double the dose because you have two fetuses to expel, right? I mean, I am not an abortionist. I don't know the science behind it entirely, but you know, I assume if you're carrying a twin pregnancy to term, if that's your plan, I think you're immediately considered high risk, or at least a higher risk. Like they treat that pregnancy slightly
Very
differently.
different.
So I assume the abortion would have to be slightly different. But in this case, they were just like, here's our standard dose of pills and we'll see you later.
Yeah.
That's what wild. The fact that you would just be like, I don't know, I'll roll the dice with your life. Like, why are we not yelling at North Carolina about this? Why is it Georgia is the villain? And, you know, to that end, why is it not anyone who withdrew these requirements that she see a doctor after and be monitored to make sure this was done properly? Again, I think I feel horrible saying that because I don't think this is the solution, but you can't say that you are a women's rights advocate if you're also saying, I hope that you go through this horrible thing alone in your bathroom and that you bleed your baby's body out into your toilet and flush it. Like, that's crazy. Sorry to be super graphic about it,
but that's the reality.
That's the reality.
It's the reality.
I mean, people get freaked out when people flush their birth control pills and antibiotics, but like, do we not think about the rest of this?
Yeah, so true. Well, I think it is like for the sake of recognizing where this conversation stands, I think it's important to talk about the fact that it is kind of no longer just a left versus right issue. Like we're at a time now where there's such vast opinions and difference of opinions. So let's go ahead and roll this clip of Melania Trump.
Oh, iconic. I love Melania.
I believe in individual freedom. I want to decide what I want to do with my body. I think I don't want government in my personal business. I think it's very important. And as I said in the book, and it's very well explained in the chapter, what does really my body, my choice means? Because timing really matters, and also the restrictions. So I encourage people to read it, because we live in the world that everybody should have individual freedom.
So Melania obviously faced some criticism, and also it
criticism.
It was a news
news
cycle moment for her, because she hasn't been super vocal about what she believes in, and she did kind of take a stance when it came to abortion that didn't necessarily align with traditional conservative values. She is obviously referring to her memoir that came out a little over a month ago, I believe, maybe 2 months ago. And in that, she talks a lot about her experience growing up, but also her experience in the White House, being the wife of President Donald Trump. And in it, she talks about everything from the border to some more controversial issues like abortion. And interesting enough that she kind of laid it all out there. And I think she specifically said, a woman's fundamental right of individual liberty to her own life grants her the authority to terminate her pregnancy if she wishes. Restricting a woman's right to choose whether to terminate an unwanted pregnancy is the same as denying her control over her own body. And then she calls for common sense standards. And so totally understand, you know, for our pro-life listeners, that's hard to hear from someone like Melania.
Wrong. It's just wrong. Like, I'll just say
totally.
it's wrong.
No, absolutely. And I think what is difficult, and maybe what she's trying to do in that clip right there is an element of individual freedom. That's why she came to America. And so she can empathize. And I'm not saying necessarily that I agree with her, but I can understand the rationale, and maybe her own experiences have led her to different beliefs. So that's what I loved about I've read some of her book, and she really does try to toe the line. But she also kind of came out strong in this way. And whether you agree with it or not, I love that she's vocalizing her opinion when so many people tried to silence her.
I think it's always helpful to vocalize your opinion, right? Like, it's helpful for the American public to see where you stand on issues. And her argument is the most common argument we hear from the pro-abortion movement. It's my body, it's my choice, that means my freedom. And you're completely missing the fact that there's a whole other body involved in the conversation that is its own separate individual life. So I will unapologetically say, Melania, you're just flat out wrong. Like, you got this one wrong. Still respect you as a person, but you got this one wrong. And so I haven't read the memoir, so maybe I should. But I think there are some issues where you can sort of say, okay, yeah, like, compromise, whatever, let's meet in the middle. The issue of life, because we're talking about literally another human being living versus dying, on Problematic Women, we will always be unapologetically fully pro-life, but would love to get your reaction to what you saw from the former First Lady and First Lady-elect.
So, yes, bring back Melania. So I think the reality is, with anybody in media or wherever, you're not going to agree with him 100%.
Absolutely.
In fact, if you do, you should probably check yourself or check them.
Yep.
What I think the challenge for the pro-life movement is that they lose people because it's so easy to scare people off the pro-life issue, right? And, you know, in my imaginary world, one day I am Melania's personal agenda setter, and I want to leave behind the Be Best campaign, and I want to move to family first.
Yeah.
If she does this and I'm not involved, I'm going to be furious. But the reality is that as a culture in America, we need to come back to being pro-family. We need to be pro-family in every sense of the world. I mean, I know J.D. Vance talked about this when he had his debate performance, but it's encouraging men to be excited about becoming fathers and to step into that role. It's encouraging women and young adults who are on the cusp of starting families, whether that's married or not, to look at it as an opportunity and as a good thing and not the end of their lives. And I think part of rebranding our understanding of why people are scared of the pro-life movement is to look at women like Melania, who came to fame in, who came of age, I should say. She did become famous, but came of age in the 90s. And the conversations about abortion and women in the workplace and feminism were different then. Yeah. Right? And I think that, we're younger than Melania, and so our understanding of what the impact of second, third, definitely fourth wave feminism is in America is different, right? But at one point, women really felt tied to this. Even the majority of women in this country of every age group identify as feminist. Why is that? Why? And why is being pro-life an anti-feminist stance? And I think until we can kind of unpack these things, we're never going to be able to totally message effectively. I mean, look at the election, right? Democrats are having to look at male Hispanic voters and say, but we thought that if we said Trump's going to deport everyone, you wouldn't vote for him. They obviously do not understand the issue, and they obviously do not understand what that demographic of people are looking for. So I'm kind of glad that Melania came out and was like, this is how I feel about it. Right. Because if she just changed with the wind and was like, I've always been extremely pro-life and this is how I feel about it, we would miss the opportunity to be like, okay, how did we get here? And how do we take this person and say, actually, it is good for women to have the choice. It's good for them to know, but also that doesn't have to be at the stake of someone else's life. The other part that I think doesn't get talked enough about this was that people use this as an opportunity to attack Donald Trump and say like, well, Melania, because they're always saying they're about to get divorced, right? Like she doesn't hold his hand walking down the plane. They're like, see, she hates him. She obviously doesn't, right? Yeah. And he was asked about it and he was just like, I told her to write how she feels, right? I thought Trump hated women. I thought women were oppressed by Republicans. And meanwhile, we have Trump being like, even though I might take heat for this, if this is how you feel, write it. Yeah. And I think that's good. And then you have JD Vance who's like, my mom is my hero and my grandma is my hero and then my wife is my best friend. Like, you know what I mean? Like we have all of these men who I think are representing this very pro-family, pro-marriage stance in the way they act. And I think the way you act is even more important than what you say.
And we talked about, or we haven't talked about this on this show, but in the memoir, she talks a little bit more. And to your point, family first is an agenda that is very close to her heart. And she even kind of became more firm in that after a few border visits, where she became so frustrated with the news portrayal of what the border looked like and how they're separating families. And she got so upset and actually went to her husband and said, what's going on? I want to see this for myself. And when she realized that it wasn't just, you know, the lack of accurate and truthful reporting, but it was also just more of the agenda pushing and virtue signaling, she started using fashion, including a jacket that said, I don't care, do you? And what she was trying to say there, according to her memoir, so according to her, was she didn't care what the news had to say because they didn't care. And she didn't care what they said about herself because she was going to the border with the intention of taking care of children. That's a part of her, you know, obviously Be Best campaign. And I just really appreciated that. And that's why I think, you know, she has opinions I don't necessarily agree with, but she's also done so much greatness for the country and showing and exposing some of the ways the media exploits Americans and causes people to get scared. And women deserve better.
And let's point out that jacket, which I think was sold by Czar at the time, sold out immediately. Right. The news media was like, isn't she a horrible person? And everyone bought that jacket. It was selling on eBay for like hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars. Like, I think they misread that situation.
Totally. Well, her also fashion sense is
it's incredible. Her inauguration coat.
Oh my gosh.
Impeccable, unbeatable. I can't wait to see what she does next.
I know.
She's kind of going for a more business lady, like semi-militaristic look of late, but I think that has to do with the fact that Barron's out of the house and she's maybe going to be more active in the things that she's doing. I mean, I think the media doesn't understand Melania Trump. She's not perfect. I don't agree with her on everything, but she's a way better first lady than I think Joe Biden is.
And let's get her on the cover of Vogue.
Seriously.
I mean, come on.
I always think that because the fact that they wouldn't have the supermodel first lady on, even though their Vogue is ridiculous. But now I'm sort of like, Evie Magazine, where are you?
Yeah,
like, step in here.
Yes,
like, forget Vogue. Let them die, you know?
Yeah. Let's have Evie take over.
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny?
Well, I mean, this has been a whirlwind of a week with all of these announcements out of the soon-to-be Trump administration, President-elect Trump's administration, of, okay, who are these people that are going to be taking the realm and taking this place of power? And some of them we kind of knew. We were like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. But my gosh, there have been a lot of surprises.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And first, I mean, again, the media is like, he hates women. And Susie Wiles, first ever chief of staff. Yeah. I mean, come on. She just killed it in the campaign with all of the insane, iconic moments that will go down in history. And now she's going to be running the White House with, or, well, you know, running
essentially.
Did you see her on election night? Like, they bring everyone out. It's like, I don't know how late you guys are up, but it's like, so Jeremy from the Quarterly and I did a 7.5 hour live stream. You can check it out on Rumble. But, you know, it went by so fast because we were just like, well, we're in it. Like, we're going to see what happens. And, you know, watching her come out on like the whole crowd of people come out and Trump is like, hello, and you are great, and all my wonderful children. In my mind, the way he says his children is, you know, my children, Eric, Don Jr., Barron, Ivanka, Tiffany Barron, Michael. Like, he mentions Barron like 500 times. That's not how he did it. But, you know, he shouts out all of his 100 children and their in-laws. And eventually he is like, where is Susie? Right. And Susie Wiles like comes to the front and then was like, but this guy has to come with me. And they're like, he's like, Trump is like, please say something. And she's like, yup, you say something. And it fades to the back. Like, it is so fascinating to see this woman who had this opportunity to make this moment like her talking point. And said she's like, I'm here to work and I have a purpose. So I am really fascinated by Susie Wiles. I can't wait to see what she does. And to your point, yes, first female to hold the role. Is Trump going to get any credit for this? No. In part because I think he just appointed her because she was good. And that's what I think that bothers me the most about, you guys probably had this conversation 100,000 times, but about Kamala Harris is going to be potentially our first female president. And that's so important. And women, don't you want a female president? What about just a good president?
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, there's more likely to be a conservative or a Republican first female president because they will just run her like a person as opposed to a token. And I think that's similar to how Trump is staffing right now. Like, Susie Wiles is good. And so she deserves it. And you can give him the feminist credit. Like, cool that he's doing that. It's not bad. But instead, I think the left-wing reaction was like, well, why hasn't there been one before? I don't know. Ask Joe Biden. He's been in the White House for the past 4 years. Like, if you wanted one so badly, but you know, it's sort of derangement. Trump can never do anything right.
No, it 100% is. Well, I was excited to see Tom Homan be appointed as border czar, and that one was not surprising. We kind of knew that this was coming. Tom Homan was the deputy director, or acting director of ICE, rather, and so he has started out his career 30 plus years ago in Border Patrol. I mean, just has this amazing resume. And I've had the privilege of interviewing him on the Daily Signal podcast and for written articles. And he's like the straightest shooter you will possibly find. Like, he will just tell you like it is. Hey, this is my plan. This is my agenda. And I will say because I think you kind of see that outside, right? Like a little bit this like tough guy. Tom Homan is one of those guys who is incredibly tough and has this like very, very tender heart that I've had the privilege of seeing a couple times. When I have spoken with him, specifically around the issue of what happens to kids at the border, he gets very emotional very fast, and he makes it very clear. That's one of the main reasons why Tom Homan says I'm so dedicated to securing the border, is because kids are so exploited at our southern border. And I've been in meetings before where literally he chokes up talking about the stories of this is what I have seen happen to kids. And so for Trump to tap him as border czar, not only an excellent choice, but just someone who's really, I think, going to hold the line, not just because he's like, we need to follow the law, but because there is like an emotional aspect there for him that he knows in securing the border, you're protecting the world's most vulnerable, especially children and especially women. So he did like a 10, 15-minute interview on Fox News. Let's go ahead and just roll a clip of that, of sort of his thought process of accepting this role as Trump's border czar.
I've been on this network 4 years complaining about what this administration did to this border. I've been yelling and screaming about it, telling what they need to do to fix it. So when the president asked me, would you come back and fix it? Of course I have to. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't. So look, I'm honored the president asked me to come back and help solve this national security crisis. So I'm looking forward to it. And look, I love Fox. I love the family there. But I think that the calling is clear. I got to go back and help because every morning I get up. Every morning I'm pissed off about what this administration did to the most secure border in my lifetime. So I'm going to go back and do what I can to fix it.
I love the energy. And I don't know if you've seen on X the comparisons between him and Harris as the border czar, because like obviously the title started under the Biden administration. But so different from, well, I haven't been to Europe. Well, we're working on it. The border's secure. It's not a problem. And in comparison, I was able to actually, a week before the election, he came and spoke at an event that I was hosting, and just the genuine passion, I want to say. I almost want to say disgust, just because there is a lot of feeling towards it. But it's not just a frustration or a disgust with the border. It's I know how to fix this because I've worked my entire career on this issue at many different levels. And I think that's what my favorite part about a lot of these appointments have been. It hasn't just been, a random person that checks a few boxes on the DEI calculator or whatever. It's literally people that have committed their life in one way or another and are passionate about solving the problem and will solve the problem, just like Tom Homan said on that interview, and how he's literally like 60 Minutes and all of these news outlets have tried to trip him up, and he has great answers. What do you have to say about deporting children? Are you going to separate them from their parents? Easy solution. We'll deport them together. I mean, he literally knows everything there is about the policy because that has been his life. And that is the consistent thing we've seen with a lot of these appointments. Susie Wiles, killer manager for not just campaigns, but now the White House. Another person I'm excited to see is Pete Hegseth, who
that was I think so far the most surprising pick.
Yeah.
That
I texted
seen.
Virginia
I don't know.
yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
All caps. What are your thoughts on that appointment? I mean, this is interesting to see someone who I don't think anyone suspected that on either side.
Truly
of the
not.
Why
aisle.
not? Why do you think they didn't?
I think because people see him as a face on Fox, right?
Mhm.
People are like, oh, he's a commentator on Fox. He has a passion for this issue, clearly, as a veteran. But to put him over the Pentagon is like, okay. So, I mean, I've been reading up on him a lot and just getting to know his story and his passion. And as I'm watching increasingly more and more interviews with him, I'm like, oh, I see it. I understand why Trump tapped him. But I think in some ways, a little bit of a dark horse.
I think one of the hard things with political appointments is that we are so unfamiliar with how many people there are.
So many
right?
people.
So I remember this, I guess I'm diverting a little bit from your question, but I remember this a little bit when the VP pick was happening, right? Everyone was like, who is the VP going to pick? And at the time, you know, I was a regular on Teamcast IRL, and the conversation in that room was always, it's going to be Vivek. It's going to be Vivek. It's going to be Vivek. I never felt that way, and it's not that Vivek Ramaswamy is not an interesting person or has a bright future in politics, but to me, he was a newcomer, and I knew a lot of people who were like, yeah, he sounds good, but he just kind of says all the buzzwords, and like it makes me feel like I can't trust him. I always thought J.D. Vance was an awesome pick, and that was because the first person who ever put J.D. Vance on my radar was my super progressive feminist boss at a previous job that I had at a private school. And if she thought his story was compelling, that would probably be helpful, right? And so, you know, this is a conversation that's also happening with like Senate leadership, right? There are some names that you hear a lot or you see in the media, but I actually have never been in the Senate. So I don't know who the senators themselves look to when there's decisions or management that has to happen here.
Yeah.
And so I think this is true, unfortunately, for all agencies. Like, just because you don't know their name doesn't mean they're good. And it's one of sort of the nice things about having the month gap between the inauguration is that they can make their case.
Right. And I think that's such a huge thing to point out is just because he's named them, they still have to go through the Senate confirmation process.
It's not guaranteed.
I mean, Tom Homan's a border czar, but Kristi Noem is our Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. So
again, surprising pick.
You thought that one was surprising?
I thought that one was surprising.
I'm not
really
totally
did.
surprised by it, and I'm going to tell you why. So again, going back to the VP thing, I think because initially when you're running for president, everyone was like, it's Trump and the VP and that's it. And really, you know, he's going to have to staff a cabinet. He's going to have to appoint, you know, all these things. I remember Kash Patel, you know, he you know, obviously wanted to be CIA, or at least a lot of people felt like he would be a really good CIA director. There's other people who are like, no, you have to be the attorney general. Like, you know, there are names that you know and you kind of know their background and you're like, I could maybe fit you anywhere. But Kristi Noem, you know, was one of the first people to send her National Guard to the border to support Texas specifically. She was also so it was Nebraska that unleashed one of these like government TikTok bans, banning it from devices in government. But Kristi Noem kind of reignited this spark, and then we saw this wave of like 22 state governors, including at least 2 Democratic state governors that were like, yeah, we do have to protect cybersecurity because TikTok's terms of service are kind of crazy.
Yeah,
right.
And you know, she obviously had her memoir with a dog. That one was a little weird. Like, she's weird in other ways, but she always had good potential to do something. But at the time, for me, it was like, I don't want you to just be like, well, it has to be a female VP, so therefore it has to be her. 100%. I don't like that mentality. But I don't know if I would have like known exactly that she was going to be Homeland Security, but I think in some ways she makes perfect sense. But maybe that's how you feel about Hexam or whatever.
Well, and I think she has shown that she can be really tough, and that's obviously you have to have someone that has a tough skin in that position. And I think in that regard, it was like, okay, I see why Trump picked her, because she's proven both in the way that she legislates and also in her book that she can.
The book was not a good moment for her.
The book was not a good moment for her.
And then doubling down, that was bad.
Yeah, but she's kind of shown that I don't really care what the public thinks. Of late, I'm going to do the hard thing.
Right.
And
she's also very patriotic. Like,
She's
she has
very
South Dakota.
patriotic.
She has Mount Rushmore. She reinstated like a fireworks show there. Trump was in love with that. Are we coming up on like the 250th?
250th. That's a huge
you know who's
bash.
been talking about this for a long time? Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has said before, like, he wants the 250th year of our country to be a huge celebration.
Yeah, it's like a whole year-long celebration.
Right, and this is one of the reasons
crazy.
I was like, this guy has to. Like, can you imagine what celebrating 250 years of America would be like under a Harris Walz
How
administration.
depressing.
No, thank
well,
you.
and that brings us to the next really exciting. It didn't exist in the last Trump administration. The Department of Government Efficiency, which has
Doge.
a deadline. Yeah, Doge.
Doge. Is it Dodge or Doge?
I think
Doge,
they're
'cause it's
Doge.
supposed to be
The
like the
Dogecoin.
coin.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to
So-
be terminally online to get some
Yeah.
of his jokes.
the little dog.
Well, I
Shiba
love
dog.
that it took
Meanwhile,
all of
Barron is
like
explaining it to Trump.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's like, it's cool, Dad. Don't worry.
Don't worry.
worry.
Now go on this podcast.
it took all of like 30 seconds for the acronym just to be everywhere. And like
love
my
it.
team members were like, oh yeah, Doge. And like other people were like, what is that?
Right.
And like,
Yeah.
no.
And
We acronymed it.
We've got Elon and Vivek in charge of that one, and they
that
have
was
until
surprising, I thought. To
Really?
see them teamed. Because I kind of thought
Mm.
that they would, it's a lot of power to amass in one place, but it makes sense because we need a lot of powerful people to make the government
Well,
smaller.
like when we thought it was going to be Ron Paul. That was like the best weekend ever. Where it was like Ron Paul tweeting back at Elon
Right.
Musk, and then you'd get, if you guys seen the movie Office Space,
Yeah.
someone exactly, and it's like Ron Paul and Elon Musk.
it's funny.
Now it's Vivek, which is fair. Dr. Paul deserves a happy retirement
But
in
I
Texas.
think
Yeah.
the concentration of power is largely because July 4th of 2026, like they have that until then to cut government wastefulness, spending,
it's true.
and
They have a short window.
there's a ton in there. Like I was in the last admin, and the amount of spending at NASA that I just didn't understand why we even had it. Like we have our own Office of Education. We have a Department of Education. Like, what's the difference? And there was so much overlap and opportunities to really like meld things together. And Trump really started to do that with his National Space Council, where they talked about their efforts, and that ultimately led to Space Force. And so there's all of the, it's like a web at this point of spending and just government programs. And I don't trust anyone else to look through that than Elon.
Well, yeah. I mean,
And Vivek.
you have two businessmen who understand the principle of efficiency and getting things done and cutting red tape in order to streamline things. So I think they're absolutely the perfect people for the job. And you have Elon, who, we have 300 plus government agencies. He has said, maybe let's get it down to 99.
Yeah.
Like that's still a lot. Like that's great. Okay,
Yeah.
let's hack this thing down. Let's cut that red tape
Right.
and save our tax dollars.
Yeah, and I think Americans are happy to hear that, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
how many times has anybody had any kind of interaction on a local or federal level with the government and been like, now you're being directed to 15 different agencies, and also there's 400 people, and these forms don't make sense. I mean, it is crazy.
Yep.
And I think the idea that the government is too big is real, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
They can regulate ponds on your land.
it doesn't make any sense. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And I think capturing the kind of star power with Elon Musk is good, because I think, especially if you're sort of libertarian leaning, having an unexpected face for this, like, but the government could and should be smaller movement is important, right? Because it's not just like, people would get critical when you say, well, we should shut down the Department of Education. They're like, but kids need education. You can't do this, and teachers, and we literacy rates or whatever. All important topics, right? We want smart kids who can read all across the country, for sure. But is the Department of Education doing that?
Yep,
Is it
right.
efficient? I think about the Bureau of Home Economics, right? I mean, I don't know what you guys know about that, but like, this was around for a long time, and eventually they rolled it into part of the Department of Agriculture, and then they just got rid of it. But it used to serve a purpose in our country. It used to help women, especially during wartime, like seeing what they needed, also making it so women have resources to better manage their homes. And instead, at some point, some bureaucrat or some congressman or someone was like, I don't care about that. I don't need it. And think about how many times that gets made on a micro level,
Right.
Especially in the other direction. How many times a bureaucrat is like, no, but we need $100,000 more dollars for this. No, I need $200,000 more dollars. No, I have decided this group should get this grant. And suddenly you get these ballooning budgets.
Totally.
And you know who pays for that? The American taxpayers.
Right.
So it's good that you're like, well, the inflation is out of control, and we're going to bring in spending on all levels.
It's been 250 years, and I'd love to see how many agencies or government, bodies have been cut rather than added, because I don't know what that number is, but I bet it's less than 10.
Yeah, I bet it's quite different as far as cut versus added.
Right.
But you had another person that you were really excited, or maybe surprised. I don't remember the reaction. The Israeli ambassador.
Oh, yes. So Mike Huckabee, I thought that was she's like
Pivot.
Oh, no, I thought it was so funny.
He's like, who are we talking about? Yes. Well, so again, I was a little bit surprised, mainly because he has I don't want to say at all he's been like, doing easy stuff, because he hasn't. He's active and involved, but he has a television show and has been out of maybe the nitty gritty of a lot of the political space for a while. And so I sort of assumed, like, okay, he's good. He's doing his thing. The reason why I think Mike Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel makes sense is because he is so pro-Israel. You have Trump, who is very, very pro-Israel. And because of Mike Huckabee's experience as a governor, he understands that kind of, legislative side. He has a lot of experience working with legislators and Capitol Hill and all that. So he understands that process, but he also has the heart and the passion to stand with Israel, to protect Israel. And I know he's going to always keep twofold, America's best interest in mind, followed by Israel's best interest. I'm like, okay, that one really makes sense coming from a conservative perspective. It's like, yeah, this absolutely makes sense. Both the skill level and just the passion are there. Now, there's one that you have been fascinated by that's not confirmed.
Oh, yes.
But rumors are, I feel like, have all but made it for sure, but we can't say it's for sure because it's not for sure.
And he's also kind of responded to people's questions. Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, which really interesting choice. I'm noticing a theme of Florida here a little bit. Just kidding. That's not exactly true. But no, I was really excited to see that as a potential pick, and it hasn't been confirmed. I don't believe there's been a statement as of
the recording of this podcast. Yes.
But a very passionate person that knows where he stands on issues related to what that position entails, and is also going to effectively communicate that to the public. And he does it in this next clip. Let's cue it up.
That's cute.
Will you call for
No, I will not. On the contrary. Are you filming it?
Wait,
so I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas has stopped building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
I think it's horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that.
I just love, I mean, okay, obviously very serious topics, and the tragedies happening in the Middle East and in Palestine, Gaza, all of that. Tragic. But he is vocalizing what the voters that have put President Trump in office have been saying this whole time is, I don't like Hamas. I'm tired of making excuses for them. The Biden administration is, dancing around the talking points and not actually saying what they believe. And I think each one of these picks, you can point to like whether they're a hawk or not, what they believe on that issue or not. And that is so refreshing after 4 years of just rhetoric, honestly.
I think Mike Huckabee is a gift to the evangelical community in America, right? I'm not evangelical, but I am a Christian, and I know that there are a lot of evangelicals who feel really strongly that Israel is part of their moral, spiritual obligation, like America's ties to that. I think Israel has the right to defend itself. I don't know that America should prioritize foreign wars over domestic issues. But I think it makes sense that Mike Huckabee is the ambassador. I have no reason to think he won't do a great job. Marco Rubio is really interesting. I'm glad you brought up that clip, because for me, that Marco Rubio is really inspired by MAGA. I think that Marco Rubio is more off the cuff than he has been in the years that I've seen him. He's not a bad guy. I know tons of people from Florida who love him, who think he's great. But I think the fact that we don't have a confirmation on the announcement means that someone has floated his name as Secretary of State to test to see what the public reaction would be.
Yeah,
I think if we knew it was going to be him, it would be out and confirmed.
Well, and they've had a bunch of press statements. No, I think honestly because they were fighting in 2016 and they didn't like each other. But
and there are a lot of Trump-based like people who would consider them, MAGA over Republican, who would feel as though you can't let him in. Remember that J.D. Vance was an ever-Trumper. I mean, how many anti-Trump people can you put into the administration before people start to feel like it's 2016 again and the staffing is bad? So I feel less confident about Marco Rubio being Secretary of State. I don't think he's a bad guy, and I don't think that he would necessarily do a bad job. I just think that this is actually, we were kind of talking about this at the top of the show, but this is the use of X and the media to see what the public reaction would be.
Totally.
There is a big difference between here's my confirmed statement about 100%. Mike Huckabee versus maybe it's going to be Marco Rubio, right? Like, perhaps.
And I will say, you said I was excited. I wasn't necessarily excited, very surprised,
I'm
just
sorry.
because
Yes.
of
Let
the
me not put
bad
words in your
blood.
mouth.
But no, I mean, seriously, that energy, to your point, like, it got me excited because I'm like, again, we're not dancing around the issues. We're just saying what we believe.
And who's
Right.
famous for that? Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Right? Who's combative and who is able to say directly. And to an extent, again, JD Vance deserves a lot of credit. He's also pretty direct in what he's doing. But I think you will see the reconfiguration of a lot of conservative politicians under a second Donald Trump victory. I don't think people should try and be Donald Trump. I think that's a mistake. You have the personality, you don't. You have to find your own way of doing it. And this is Marco Rubio doing it, right? Like, he still looks like the classic politician, right? He's like, you know, a poster.
Gets me.
Right, he's like a poster boy for being like a beautiful conservative from Florida or whatever. But he is telling you exactly who he thinks is to blame for this. And I think, to both of your points, that's what the American people want.
Yeah.
They don't want this ambiguous, you know, back and forth. And Democrats struggle with the Israel-Palestine conflict because there was no way for them to win on that issue. I think conservatives and Republicans, or, you know, people who lean conservative, understand the nuances a little bit more. They are anti-Hamas. They don't like that young children are dying. But when Trump said on that CNN town hall, you know, Caitlin Bristow, is that her last name, was pushing him, who do you want to win the Ukraine-Russia war? Who do you want to win? And he was like, I want the war to stop. I want the dying to stop. I think that's ultimately how the American people feel. And so if you're able to say, like, I think Hamas is at fault, and so we are going to negotiate a ceasefire based on this premise, and we're going to act accordingly. It's very different than being like, well, everybody's making good points, and meanwhile, please don't blow up the aid truck, and also maybe don't attack them on their holiday. Like, that's awful and getting everyone nowhere. In fact, that's why this conflict's been going on for over a year. I mean, really, this conflict's 4,000 years old, but you know,
It goes way back. Yep.
it's interesting, but you know, I don't want to make any bets, but I'm not so confident about Marco Rubio right now.
Fair.
So, are there any appointments that have really surprised you so far, or that you have been particularly pleased to see?
I was happy to see Stephen Miller get the deputy policy position. I think that he is a good choice, and I think immigration has to be a key component of the next 4 years. Well, really the next 18 months before we have to like head into the battleground of midterm elections. And I'm kind of waiting to see. I think the ambassador to China is going to be really key.
Yeah, right.
I think especially with all the tension with Taiwan. You know, there are certain things that I'm still waiting on. I mean, I think Homan, if you realize that the border is not just a national security issue, but it's a humanitarian issue, and it's a cultural issue. We can't have the deaths of young children who are human trafficked on our conscience. We can't have the deaths of Americans who are, you know, unfortunately experiencing addiction and die because of fentanyl poisoning on our conscience. We can't have a border that incentivizes people to take terrible journeys and to pay money to terrible gangs, to leave their home countries at, you know, with the risk of everything, right?
Yep.
Like, this is not helping anybody. Anyone who tells you it is bad. And you were talking about the passion that Homan has, and I think that's true. I think it's really important that someone is in that position. It's sort of like we get so many appointments, and then I'm also like, still waiting. I'm still waiting to see what happens.
There's a lot more to come.
I know. I mean, so when Trump was at the Libertarian National Convention, I think that was September, August, all of these months are running together for me.
Wild season.
He promised that he would put a libertarian in his cabinet, right? So who is that? Do we need a card carrying, like, go down to the Cato Institute and pull a libertarian out of the library? Like, someone no one has ever heard of, to your point, with, like, well, people associate him with Fox. Like, if you've never heard of this wonk, but he is for sure a libertarian, Trump puts him in his cabinet, maybe he's qualified to do it, but maybe the public won't see it that way. Or is it more like Rand Paul, right? Rand Paul has libertarian influence, but he is a Republican. On the other hand, it would be very difficult to get elected to Congress or the Senate in the United States as a full-on libertarian.
Right. Yeah.
And so there is, to me, that's one of the appointments that I'm waiting on. I'm waiting to see how he fulfills this promise to the libertarians and what that looks like.
That's going to be interesting.
Because, you know, Thomas Massey, I've had the chance to interview him before. He's wonderful. You know, he is all for ending the Department of Education. So do we put him in charge of that? Or, like, do you put him on Department of Agriculture? Like, there are so many people who are interesting, and their political philosophy could do a lot of good things, especially if we are now bringing on Elon Musk and Vivek to be like,
Yeah.
and we're downsizing government.
Right.
There are
Hack.
libertarians chomping at the bit to get that appointment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a little bit of a fun question here in a second. But before we get to that, for anyone listening who's saying, okay, this is great, love the show, but I need more news, and I need more news from the Daily Signal. Well, we have you covered. If you're a podcaster, which I assume if you're listening to this, you maybe enjoy the occasional podcast, check out the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. So every weekday around 5 p.m., we bring you a 10-minute rundown of the news of the day to keep you up to date. You can listen in 10 minutes on your ride home from work, while you're cooking dinner, waiting in the pickup line for your kids at their soccer practice, whatever it might be. We are clear, we're succinct, we keep it to the straight news, and also, though, bring in some of our reporters and Heritage Foundation experts to give you a little bit of analysis as well. So be sure to subscribe to the Daily Signal podcast, so every weekday you can keep up with the news that you care about. But we're talking about presidential appointments. So I think a fun question, because, you know, there's been so many wild things that have happened. So this is goofy. This won't actually happen. But it could. It could be shocked. So think of your favorite celebrity. What department would you put them in charge of?
Your eyes just got so big.
This is an interesting one. I'm sort of like semi-Amish and a boomer, so I don't know any celebrities. I'm a level with you. I really like Taylor Swift, but I don't want her to be in charge of anything. I want her to marry Travis Kelce and have a lot of babies and usher in a new era of
Is the divorce
from,
or not the divorce, the breakup contract? You don't think that's real?
I don't
think it is either, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's real.
Media,
No
man.
way. So in that extent, you know, that eliminates her from taking a position in government. She's got to focus on her family. Although just generally having her be like any kind of token position, like she could be the ambassador to, like, I don't know, England. And I'll be like, Taylor Swift works for Donald Trump.
Pick some like dot on the map country.
Yeah. I don't know, who would you pick? I'll think of a better answer than Taylor Swift and then not giving her a position.
So John Krasinski, of The Office, Jack Ryan, you know, fantastic actor, major fan. If Pete Hegseth was not head of Department of Defense, I would put John Krasinski as head of Department of Defense.
Why is that?
Well, so he's very pro-military. He's very open about the fact that there's a ton of veterans in his family. He's very patriotic, and he has survived the wild world of Hollywood and maintained that patriotism and love of America. So if you had to put someone somewhere, I'm like, I feel like he fits the bill more. Pete Hegseth, definitely a better choice for that job. But if I had to put him somewhere.
But that's a good way to think about it, because I didn't realize that he was so pro-military.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people start associating people with their role on a TV show, right? Like, what's his face who played the president in The West Wing? Like, I don't know that you would just pick him.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Or now I'm thinking, like, what would Chris Pratt do? Because
Right.
I feel like
he could be one of the undersecretaries for a branch then,
That's
you know?
true.
Like maybe not the Air Force, the Navy, because I don't know if I would put him as a Marine. I mean, he's into the training.
Or
but
like even... Doesn't he have a farm? Didn't he grow up in like
ag.
Oregon? Like,
maybe
maybe
ag.
he could be in the ag, because maybe they need like a very nice, fun spokesperson who's going to do something. And you
I could see
throw
him
in there.
doing well in ag.
Just Trump said who his press secretary is going to be?
No, I don't
We're waiting.
believe so. But he did just make a few announcements. His comms director, and some of the higher up positions in White House have been announced, and a lot of them have worked on the campaign, which is to be
That's
expected.
super normal.
Yeah.
That's very normal. Who would you say?
Oh man. Okay. Well, I was gonna go with Morgan Wallen because obviously he's the best. And originally, I was gonna say DOT because Homeboy definitely is not driving an electric.
DOT.
Oh, Department of Transportation.
Thank you.
Because
DC talk.
yes, because he definitely would roll back some of the regs that are forcing electric vehicles on everyday families. Obviously, he has kind of a regular American upbringing from Eastern Tennessee. And so originally I was going to say Department of Transportation, but I am actually going to go back and say FEMA because he was one of the only celebrities, well, not only, he was one of the first celebrities to provide aid to all of those that suffer from the hurricane in Tennessee. And I just think that if you've seen any of his social media, any of his background story, and just kind of what his actions are now, he just seems like such a kind-hearted man that would help those people that he can resonate. He has a lot of empathy, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Is he the one who threw the chair off that building
He
recently?
did, actually.
We love it, so he's passionate.
But he's passionate. It's fine. No one got killed. It's fine. He makes mistakes. It's okay.
Okay, another one from Tennessee then would be Dolly Parton, who's run her literacy program for years, so she could be Department of Education.
Oh, I love that.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be
And
so
during COVID,
interesting.
she was like, I am now reading books out loud to children, right? Like
Right.
there isn't
Love
there's activism there, which
I
could be
love
fascinating.
that.
She's a very
let's
intelligent
just go, like,
woman.
And
down
similar
Broadway
to
and
sort
pick
of
people.
Susie Wiles over here, like
Yeah.
Dolly Parton was like, I don't want to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. No, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah.
There's a humbleness there, which could
Yeah.
be cool. Plus, doesn't her husband work in like construction and we never see his face?
Yeah.
This is the energy that we need.
We
You
need
know he
that.
voted for Trump.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think she voted for Trump. So.
We'll have to see. Maybe she'll tell us.
Is yours
soon.
Dolly Parton then? Is that who
Maybe
you're
it would be
choosing?
Dolly Parton for education.
I
Although
like
I do
that.
think, like everything, you have to promise that you're going to scale everything down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, with Elon and Vivek, I was originally going to say Elon for NASA just because I think he'd dismantle that. But now that he's
No,
in
SpaceX
Doge,
has to go rescue those astronauts. There's
but
no
with
way that he
Doge,
would take over
he would
NASA.
definitely. You know what? That's what my point was.
your
Originally, he
competitor,
was my
Elon Musk, they're
choice, but I
worse than
can't
you.
choose him because he's so great that he's already been chosen. It's great. We love it. He's gonna do great stuff.
Can you
at
imagine
Doge.
if you were the CEO of a company and there was a failing company that was run by the government? They're like, but now you have to run our company. You have to.
You have
Right.
to fix it.
That's like the running joke. It's sad, but
Yeah,
it's real.
it's kind
It's
of
the
sad,
reality.
but true. Well, go ahead. Tell us, how do we follow your work, Hannah Claire? How do
Yeah.
we keep up with what you're doing?
So the best way to find me is on X. I don't know if I should look at camera or look at you. I'm going to continue
You
to look
do
at
what you want to do.
Whatever
the
feels
best way to find me
natural.
is on X. I'm Hannah Claire B on X. I'm also Hannah Claire B on Rumble, so you can check out my work there. I also have a YouTube channel, again, Hannah Claire B. If you want to follow me on Instagram, where I post occasional pictures of my cats, that's hannahclaire.b. And I just really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been
Thank you
so
for
fun.
coming.
I think this podcast is very, very cool.
Oh,
Aw.
wow. Thank you. We appreciate you driving all the way over here to Washington, D.C. from West Virginia.
Yeah.
Making the trek.
Look, I'm just in the cosmopolitan world over here. It's crazy.
I love it. Well, y'all have a great rest of your week. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on brand new shows from Problematic Women. We're going to continue to be following all of these appointments as they roll out. Wild times we are living in, indeed. But don't forget to give us a shout out. Follow us on Instagram.
Answer a question.
Answer
Who would you
a question.
put?
Yeah, we'll throw that on our Instagram story so you can weigh in. If you had to choose a celebrity to serve, who would it be? We'll see you right back here next week.